I saw Melissa, I go, what did you be like? Nope, not doing it. I'm about.
Yeah. Throw her into the mix.
Hello. There we go. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming. Please grab a cup of coffee or some juice and some breakfast and come on in. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. I'm Catherine Wygant Fawcett. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Family-Owned Business. And I'd like to welcome our remote users. First, we have 3. Yes, so welcome. New for today, we'll be recording this program and posting on YouTube as a webinar. So you'll be able to, we'll be able to share that on Facebook and on our website and other things as well. The IFOB is, or the Institute for Family-Owned Business, is a nonprofit that helps family businesses succeed. And we have over 35 programs this year, and all members and future members are welcome to join us. So I do have that at the front. I have our calendar of programs. This goes through to the end of the year. And then we do have a Next Gen program that's coming up on October 20th that we'll have here from 5 to 7. And we're bringing a food truck for that one, so that should be interesting. We're going to hear from Lindsay Gifford, Joe Capoza, Kim Wallach, and Dottie Chalmers, who have spearheaded all of our peer advisory groups, and they've been working with leadership coaches. And they're going to talk a little bit about that experience and how that has helped them. And then out front, I also have our Maine Family Business Awards program that tells a lot about the Institute. Mark your calendars for May 17th next year. So we will have it at Lafayette at the Holiday Inn by the Bay, another great family business. We had 180 nominations last year. They got narrowed to 31 semifinalists, 20 finalists, and 7 winners. So in January we have nominations. So if you know any family businesses, please nominate them. You can also check out our website at fambusiness.org. And our memberships run through the calendar year, so they start in January. So now's a really good time to join because it's prorated. And for our programs, it's for all of your employees. So if you have 150 or 200 people, they can all come, like Jim knows, munch all you want. And we have generous sponsors who help promote that. So once you've joined as a member, you're registered on our website, and you can also come to the programs. And then today, we have our final program in a 3-part series. We have some family members. Raise your hands who've been here for all 3. I know we have some, yes. So thank you so much. We started it in July with Jane Hilbert Davis, who started us off with Succession Planning 101. She gave us homework with our fire drill and a checklist for family members. And then in August, we discussed awareness, communication, and conflict resolution in succession planning. And we played the game of 10 play with Elizabeth Ruthie and Steve Barton, as there might be some challenges in succession planning. And that brings us today to our final program, which is called Succession Planning 103, Succession Strategies for Family-Owned Businesses. So Seth Webber here is a principal of BerryDunn, and he's going to lead us in this discussion. And we're going to talk about how a family business can do a successful transition either within their family as a co-op or ESOP or hybrid. And we will have our panelists are Steve Tenney, Senior Vice President of Family Wealth Management Partners, UBS. We have Rob Brown, Director of Business Ownership Solutions for the Cooperative Development Institute. We have Jeannine Pendergast, Vice President, Senior ESOP Client Advisor for Spinnaker Trust. Then we'll later be joined by Jim Costello, Jr., Vice President Operations with Sun Media Group, and he'll be representing a family transition. And then we have Susanne Ward, founder and owner of Rock City Roasters and Rock City Café, representing a co-op. And then we'll have Danielle Moody of Moody's Collision Centers, representing an ESOP and a family business. And our programs would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors. So I'd like to thank our sponsors in a few minutes, invite each of them to come up and say a few words. and then we'll turn it over to Seth. So the first one up will be Tim Benoit from Perkins Thompson, then Jeannine Pendergast from Spinnaker Trust, and then Andrea Tetzlaff from Maine Biz. And we value your feedback. That's how we ended up doing this series of succession programs, because after each program, we hand out a survey. So I have that here for you, which we'll give out. And we are in our planning session now for next year. So we really value your input and your thoughts. And to keep you on your seat while you're waiting and filling those out, we do have fun door prizes. So we do have Maine Biz is giving us 2 tickets, The Last Gasp, and then Edgecombe Potters was very generous and gave us some fun plates as well. So please make sure, I'll come around and get your business cards just before we do that. And then I will turn it over to Tim, and then to Jeannine, and then Andrea, and then Seth. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. My name is Tim Benoit. I'm a partner at Perkins Thompson. We're a general practice law firm in Portland, serving our clients since 1871. We are very pleased to be sponsoring this important program. We have a great number of clients who've gone through the business succession planning process, and I can say that it takes commitment and endurance and really good communication, honest communication. I think you will find that today's program will be a good start for all of you, and I want to thank you and enjoy the presentation.
I'm Jeannine Pendergast from Spinnaker Trust, and my job at Spinnaker Trust is to be the trustee of ESOPs. And I want to thank the Institute for putting this program on. I think it's a great way for people to learn about different succession planning tools and ways to transition your business. So thank you.
Good morning, I'm Andrea Tetzlaff with Maine Biz. We have a really close partnership with the IFOB. We do a number of partnerships throughout the year. Obviously, our kind of purposes with the business community complement each other very nicely. So thank you for having this program this morning. Thank you all for coming out. It was great to see a bunch of my customers here today. And hopefully you all might be able to come out and join us. We have an event coming up on October 6th. At the Doubletree, that is the CEO Breakfast Forum. So take a look at it, and if you're interested, hopefully we'll be able to see you there. Thanks, everybody.
And now we'll turn it over to Seth.
Great, thank you. My name is Seth Webber. I'm a principal with BerryDunn, and we want to pull the slides up. My role this morning is to help moderate, so I'm going to be kind of the ringmaster for a 3-ring circus we've got going today. We've got a lot of great information. We've got some great panelists. Thank you, everybody who agreed to be on the panel and for joining us. So if we go to the first slide, what we're going to do today is in 4 parts. We're going to talk a little bit about setting the stage. We're going to talk a little bit about co-ops and what those are. And we're going to talk about ESOPs, and then we're going to have a panel discussion because we've got some great representatives who can speak to all 3 of these. So Steve Tenney is our expert on setting the stage, Rob Brown on co-ops, Jeannine on ESOPs. Next slide. So one of those housekeeping things that I'm supposed to do that I forgot about, if you would set your phones to stun, that would be great. Thank you again to all our sponsors. These programs wouldn't be possible without everybody stepping up and really helping out. And the panelists have put a lot of time into this and really appreciate their help as well. So how does this all tie in together? Catherine spoke a little bit about the 2 pieces that came before, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. So next slide here. So Jane Hilbert Davis led us off with a great discussion of an integrated planning model. So the fact that these things aren't all singular and don't happen in a vacuum. So there's an estate plan. What is it that people are trying to accomplish from an estate planning perspective? And how does that actually flow into the personal financial plan, and what do the retirement plans look like? What does that mean in terms of a management and an ownership succession plan? So if you spend all this time building up this great asset in this family-owned business, how do you actually convert some of that value into money that you can use in retirement? And then how does that all tie into the business plan? And you'll note that these are all circled together because any change in any aspect of the plan impacts the overall plan. So if we go to the next slide. So these are some of the challenges that people face with succession plans. And again, Jane did a great job of teaming this up. 80% of businesses have no succession plan, which is shocking because most of you are in business and you know and probably live by the mantra that a failure to plan is a plan to fail. So the fact that 80% of businesses out there have no succession plan is pretty huge. Ironically, it's the largest concern of most family business leaders is what does the succession plan look like? And this third bullet is really interesting because it ties in, I think, to some of the things that Steve's going to talk about this morning, and also what Steve Barton and Elizabeth Royke brought up. And it's not only transferring the wealth and the business, but it's also transferring the values. So what is really the identity of that business, and what is it that the owners and the founders have tried to instill in that business, and how do we get that passed through to the next generation? So 46% of CEOs are planning to retire in the next 5 years. 30% plan to never retire. Of those who have identified a successor, 85% say it will be a family member. So that brings us to our next slide. Some of the success factors. I really want to hit on this bottom bullet point, 30-13-3. 30% of businesses will successfully transition from the first to the second generation. 13% will transfer to the third. Only 3% of family-owned businesses will transfer to the fourth. So if you've hit that fourth generation or beyond, you are in a very rare club. And one of the challenges of doing that is how do you transfer that entrepreneurial spirit and drive into the next generation? That is certainly not my area of expertise. But if we go to the next slide, that brings us to our 102 session that Elizabeth Royke and Steve Barton did not long ago. And they were really talking about awareness, communication, conflict resolution. So family business, any business is already complicated enough. But in a family business, you add in these multiple dynamics and multiple roles. And the question is, how do you get perspective? So Steve and Elizabeth went through this great exercise of how do we, where do we have to move to get that perspective, and how do we understand how our actions and activities impact on all the other people who are in that same family dynamic. And that brings us to this next piece, which I thought was really interesting because this struck me when they were talking about it in the last session. And it's really the bottom, that's source to who. In working with businesses, I found this time and again, we can get agreement on results. Those are, the financials or the metrics, or here's the business plan, how are we doing against the business plan? We can even get agreement on process. If we're talking about succession plan, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? Where are we trying to get? But a lot of times when we're working with business owners, we get to this, okay, we've gotten through all this, but they just don't get it. And it's the it that's the problem. It's that agreement on source. It's the identity. And how do we get that identity built into these plans? And that brings us to the game of 10, which Steve Barton's put together. And so it is a reframing device for having some of these conversations. So that sets the stage for today. Succession Planning 103. What we want to talk about on our next slide is succession planning in general, how to get started. Because this is a journey. And the thing about the journey is, as professionals, we're not really interested in what journey it is you want to take. Excuse me, we're not interested in what your destination is, but we are interested in what journey it is you want to take and where you want to end up. There are lots of different ways we can get there. We're going to talk about internal transfers in particular today. We're going to talk about costs and ESOPs, but it really depends on what is the overall goal and how do we help get you there. So Steve is going to talk about how they launch into that conversation. Then we'll talk about some of the basics of co-ops, ESOPs, and then have a panel discussion, and we'll welcome questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve to talk about our first piece.
Good morning, everybody. When you start talking about succession planning, it can certainly be intimidating. It's hard to know with all the choices out there what the right path is. It's a lot like a jigsaw puzzle. You got 1,000 pieces on the table here with no box top. You don't know what the final answer is going to look like. So you got to start somewhere. You find the corners, you find the edges, and then gradually you work in from there. Do we have?
You need your slides?
Yes, please. So how do you get started? We like to start with 2 questions. And these are questions that you answer in your own way. You don't worry about how the answers get interpreted. Just answer them in your own way. And the first question is, what is the ideal outcome and timing of your succession? What do you want it to look like? And when do you think that might happen? When do you want to step away? Who is going to own and manage the business? Now, keep in mind that owning and managing can be 2 different things. There are plenty of companies around, family-owned businesses, where ownership and management are different. The next question, what would happen to you, what would happen to your family and to your business if you didn't show up tomorrow? And by not showing up, I mean really not showing up. We're not going to live forever. I think we all know someone or several people that have died early, that have had serious health issues, that just can't show up and work anymore. What if that happened to you? Is your infrastructure, your documents, are they all consistent with what you would want to have happen? 80% of the time, I would suggest the answer is no. So you need to go through, I think it was one of the earlier sessions, they talked about your fire drill. Go through a fire drill. What if you weren't around tomorrow? Would everything happen the way you wanted? And do your documents support that? Keep in mind that I'll refer to documents. It's fine to have a plan in your head, okay? But if you're not around, no one's gonna know what that plan is. Your plan has to be written and it has to be current, both of those. If your plan hasn't been updated in 5 years or so, or something significant has happened in the interim, you've got to update the plan. In terms of, Seth gave me a few questions to touch on. So the next question is how do you make sure that there's alignment between your business transition plan and your objectives as business owners? What we use is a discovery meeting. We get all the key players and their spouses, all the key players separate with their spouses, so we'll interview each one of them. And we keep them separate to make sure everyone's on the same page. About 60 questions. I've got 3 of them here today. Okay, so I'd like everyone to take a whopping 10 seconds and just think about each of these questions. They are fairly personal. We find that they're also very revealing and serve as a great foundation for the planning that's going to happen. So I'll ask the questions and I'll pause after each one. The first one is, what is important to you about money? This question starts to get to your core values and a little bit of your history. You might say, well, security is important. Well, why is that important? And then why is that important? We dig, and we get to your core values. And your core values are what serve as the foundation for that plan. The next question, if you didn't have to work anymore, what would you do? This question starts to establish your ideal outcome. It's something to build towards, something to strive for. And the third question, which family member relationships are most important to you? This may seem like a pretty obvious question, especially if your spouse is in the room. Oh, it's my spouse and my kids, of course. I would say at least half the time we ask this question, that's not the answer. And it's not because the spouse and kids aren't most important. It's because something else gets triggered, okay? When I was asked this question the very first time, I immediately thought of my niece, Lila. She's got divorced parents. They don't have a lot of financial resources. I'm concerned about her being able to pay for college. I feel it's my responsibility and my wife's responsibility to make sure she can pay for school. It might be UC Boulder, where she lives in Colorado. That's fine, but we got to make sure she can do that, and because that will allow her to really progress through life. She's only 12 years old, but she's the one I thought of. Okay, and again, these important people need to be reflected in your plans. So again, these questions are the discovery process, discovery meeting is how we make sure there's alignment between your business transition plan and your very personal objectives. Next question is, what do you look at to determine if you should have what's called an internal transfer to the next generation or an outside sale? There are two major determinants. One is financial and one is the other is people. On the financial side, if you are 60 and you've been running your business for a while and you're thinking, you know, I could do something different here. I'd like to retire. Is there a financial need? Do you need a stream of income to support your lifestyle? The path if the answer is yes, there are sort of three basic groups you can sell to. You could sell to your kids, you could sell to an ESOP, you could sell to an outside third-party buyer. You're going to get a different valuation, most likely, and I'm oversimplifying here. If you sell to a third-party company, you're probably going to get a higher valuation, higher price, than if you sell to an ESOP. If you sell to an ESOP, you're probably going to get more than if you sell to the next generation. So your needs are going to help determine what path you take. And don't forget the terms are really important. Who's going to manage the company after you sell it? Who is going to, is the company going to stay in place? Are there employment contracts in place for your key employees? The terms often, frankly, are more important than the price. A lot of business owners are very close to, they feel very loyal to their employees and also their community. And if a third party comes in, buys the company, there is a chance it goes away, which a lot of people wouldn't want. So again, that can influence your decision. The next determinant of what happens to the company is the people. If you are thinking of passing it to the next generation, you need two absolutely critical components: desire and ability. Next generation has to have both desire and ability to take on your company. If you think the next generation has the desire to lead your business, ask them. You might be surprised. If you think the next generation does not have the desire to run your business, if you're in Maine and they're in Seattle, for example, ask them. You might be surprised more often than not. And if you get that wrong, there's some disharmony that can start to fester in the family. The other part of that is experience and timing. The next generation may have the desire, they may have the ability, but they're not quite ready. There's several companies in Maine that where this has happened, and they bring in an interim CEO or president to run the business, while the next generation that has the desire and ability might be 32 years old. Bring someone in from the outside for 10 years. okay? To bridge. You're ready to retire, your kids aren't quite ready to take over, but they will be. Bring someone in for 10 years. Okay, that would be a critical part of an internal transfer. There's a lot to think about, a lot to digest when you're talking about succession planning. You need a team. You need an advisory team. So who is on it? I break it down into primary and secondary advisors. Primary advisors are those with whom you have very frequent contact. There's an ongoing need for their services. Secondary advisors are more specialized. They've got much more specific roles, and they might also be more transaction oriented. Okay. The primary advisors, there are 3 that I'll mention. First is your attorney. By attorney, I'm referring primarily to your corporate attorney, where they're providing ongoing advice. There are 2 important other categories for attorneys: mergers and acquisitions, if there's a transaction, and estate planning, also critical. But both of those tend to be I call them a little more transaction oriented. Okay, it's not ongoing advice every year forever. I would put the M&A and estate planning attorneys in the secondary advisors category. Next is your CPA. Obviously, they've got plenty of filings to take care of. If you've got a good one, they are giving you ongoing advice in terms of how to manage your tax liabilities, to take full advantage of the tax laws that are out there. And last, your wealth manager. Frankly, this is a role that is not terribly well understood. They've got 2 primary functions. One is investment consulting or investment advice. The other is advanced planning. What's advanced planning? Advanced planning has 4 components. First is wealth protection, making sure your assets are not unjustly taken. Wealth enhancement looks at things like cash flows and after-tax returns. Wealth transfer is the efficient and effective passing of assets down to the next generation. And then charitable giving is often important to a lot of business owners, especially if they're well entrenched in their community. Let's move on to secondary advisors. I've got 2 slides here. First, commercial bankers. You probably have an ongoing borrowing need that they certainly help with. I find many bankers have a very close relationship with their clients, and they are also often involved in transactions. Investment bankers tend to be focused mostly on transactions. They can help you buy another company or help you sell your company. They generally do a fantastic job of marketing, coming up with a plan, executing that plan. Consultants. Sometimes consultants are a primary advisor if they're giving you ongoing strategic advice. Sometimes they're a little more specialized, so they could be primary. But the good ones do a super job of helping with overall corporate strategy. Next is insurance experts. They focus on life and disability insurance, especially as it relates to your estate plan, your buy-sell agreement, and your overall wealth protection. Those insurance policies have got to be consistent with your plan. Valuation specialists generally will be involved in a transaction. If you're selling the company, for example, or if you're converting to an ESOP, or if you have an existing ESOP, you need one every single year to give you an updated valuation. Philanthropy. Philanthropic experts can help on an ongoing basis, like with a company or corporate foundation, also with a family foundation. Philanthropy can also be used in a transaction. Okay, so if you're selling part of your business, even if it's to an ESOP or an outside party, you can use philanthropy to shelter some of those capital gains, thereby reducing your tax burden. And finally, when it comes to co-ops and ESOPs, they're involved. Okay, you've got to have someone helping you that really understands those transactions and all the implications that are involved. I had a couple conversations just this morning about ESOPs and also getting advice from people that have gone through it before. Sean has gone through it before, and he has relied on other experts. And I can't say enough about asking questions and learning. So you've got your team. 2 critical parts about your team. Number 1, have a quarterback. There's got to be someone that acts as the clearinghouse for your information, the interpreter that coordinates and collaborates with everyone. The quarterback is typically one of the primary advisors. Second thing, get everyone at the table together at the same time. Now, I'm not saying that it's you and 10 advisors, okay? It's probably you, the 3 primaries, and maybe one of the specialists, one of the secondaries where it's topical at that time. If you get everyone together at the table together, you get talented and well-intentioned advisors. And by having everyone there, they're not going to work at cross purpose with one another. If they're separate, they often do. Second thing that happens is there's a wonderful dynamic that comes up, and we see it all the time in our practice, where you get advisors that are able to, they know enough about each other's business, they're able to professionally challenge each other. The result is you end up with an even better solution. Okay, so you've got to have a quarterback, and you got to get everyone around the table together. Finally, what tools do we use to help succession planning? We look at succession planning as being both an art and a science. First, the science of succession planning really comes down to using illustrations. An illustration is, frankly, software that takes in all of your assets, all of your objectives. You see where you are now. Then you take all of the recommendations that come from those advisors that I just talked about, and you see where you are now, and you see where you're going to be tomorrow with those changes. Again, succession plan can be very involved. A lot of solutions can be thrown at you. By using an illustration, you see the bottom line. You see cash flows for the rest of your life. That's what supports your lifestyle. Illustrations show you, with estate planning, it shows you, how much money, or how much value, I should say, is going to your heirs, how much is going to taxes, how much is going to charity. And you can start to affect that balance. You see how those recommendations affect that balance. Illustrations are great for advisors because it allows advisors to make better recommendations. And illustrations are great for business owners because they're able to understand the decisions that are being made, and they're able to move forward. Okay. Lastly, family forum. This is the art of succession planning. Family forum is when you get all the stakeholders together. Not everyone's comfortable doing that. Some people need to warm up to it a little bit. We have yet to see one that didn't end up with super results. We have seen conflict. We've seen plenty of family harmony. But every single one ends up going in the right direction. It's best if let's say the matriarch and patriarch are an open book, where they're willing to share not only what their plans are, but what decisions they are considering. The forum can be used either to solicit or to inform. The forum can solicit, you can say, this is what we're thinking. What do you think about that? Someone might say, hey, even though I live in Seattle, I want to be involved. Don't forget about me. Great. Take that information, you go change your plan. So you go into it knowing that what you collect, what information you gather may impact your plan. It may be used simply to inform. You may not want their input, okay? And that's okay. It is for you to inform the next generation, the other stakeholders, as to what's going to happen. Either way, whether it's soliciting or informing, you are creating an important level of transparency. Transparency is important because it heads off problems later on. Okay, the forum was their chance to speak up. You make it very clear that's their chance. If everyone understands what's going to happen, and then when it happens, they won't be surprised. And you'll be able to most likely maintain that family harmony that is so important to you.
Okay. Great. Thank you. So that brings us, so importantly, you know, what we're talking about is setting that strong foundation so that we know where we're headed on this journey. And that's what the discovery meeting really helps out with. So now we want to turn over to Rob to talk with us a little bit about the basics of co-ops. So if we go to the next slide, Rob is the Director of Business Ownership Solutions at the Cooperative Development Institute, and he's working on setting up co-ops here in Maine and New England, focusing on Maine.
And New York.
And New York.
A couple other places.
Great. So, Rob, thank you.
So, great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the Institute for having us for this forum. Just a little bit about the Cooperative Development Institute. For those in the room, I assume most of you who have never heard of it. We are a 501c3 nonprofit corporation operating throughout New England and New York. We were founded in 1994 and work across all sectors of cooperatives, providing education and training and technical assistance. We are the U.S. Department of Agriculture designated Northeast Center for Cooperative Business Development. USDA has about a dozen and a half or so centers around the country that they support to do cooperative development services, all in rural areas. And so the next slide, please. So that's a bit about CDI. So let's start right off with getting some definitions right. What is a cooperative? A cooperative is a business that is jointly owned and democratically controlled by its members and that operates for the benefit of its members. That can take a lot of different forms and has taken a lot of different forms historically, but that is the root definition of what a cooperative is. So what does that mean? Let me give you a couple examples. To the extent people know about cooperatives, they tend to think of food co-ops, which tend to have a reputation more as health food store type, whole food store type entities, but credit unions are cooperatives. They are also a consumer co-op. They're a financial services cooperative. They're owned by their depositors as opposed to outside shareholders. Residents can form cooperatives, so housing cooperatives are very common in cities. A large portion of CDI's work throughout New England is working with mobile home park residents. When those parks come up for sale, we work with the residents, if they're interested, to form a cooperative housing corporation and buy out the park, and then run it themselves with assistance. Business cooperatives, some of you may know of these. They tend to be not too visible to the public, but business cooperatives form to gain better access to inputs they need to operate or to improve their ability to sell products and services they create. So what does that mean? So purchasing cooperatives. If you go into a small town grocery store in Maine and you see Surefine product on the shelf, that independent grocer is a member of Associated Grocers of New England, which is a $1 billion wholesale grocery co-op with about 600 owners, members, shareholders around New England. Also, companies like ACE or True Value, those are cooperatives. Those are also purchasing cooperatives and to some extent marketing cooperatives. The other side of it, something very common in Maine, are more producer co-ops, which are also business co-ops. So something like Cabot Creamery. Cabot Creamery is a cooperative. It is owned by independent dairy farmers who sell their raw product for marketing and value-added purposes that we all know as Cabot on the grocery store shelf. Also, lobster co-ops. Lobster co-ops in Maine control about 1/3 of that iconic industry. So there are lots of cooperatives out there. Sometimes we know of them, sometimes we just know what they do and don't realize they're cooperatives. For the purposes of today's discussion, we're going to talk a bit about worker co-ops and specifically conversion to worker co-ops. So a worker co-op is a firm, a business, where the employees are the shareholders of that business, and those shares represent a one member, one share, one vote basis. So in law, a cooperative is considered a democratically owned corporation. And that is the definition per the IRS, per regulation, that is a one share, one member, one vote corporation. So next slide. So how are cooperatives used in succession planning? Just to set the stage a little bit about why I think this is particularly critical for Maine. We have the oldest workforce in the nation. We hear it all the time. That certainly holds true for our business owners as well. Just an idea of scope and scale. The annual rate of retirement is projected to double over the next 2 decades compared to the last 2 decades. So it's accelerating twice as fast. Here in Maine, we've got a little over 32,000 small businesses with employees. About 3/4 of those businesses have fewer than 100 employees. About half of those businesses have fewer than 20 employees. And as we saw before, most of these business owners, particularly these small business owners, have no succession plan whatsoever. And liquidation is not a succession plan, right? So we need to help Maine small businesses both to preserve wealth in this state, but also to preserve these jobs. If a business of 10 employees in rural Maine goes under or liquidates, that loss of that business, that community vitality, that economic vitality in those jobs is very noticeable in small rural communities. So I think this is a challenge that Maine faces that we want to pay attention to. So in succession planning, I'll give you three examples. Immediate exit. This is, I'll say right up front, not advisable. I've done it, but it's not advisable. Immediate exit is a business owner who went through their whole life, maybe they created a great business, and they waited until it was time to retire, to think about what to do with those businesses. Perhaps the whole time they thought a child was going to take over the business. Perhaps they just assumed they'd put it on the open market and get a good price for it. Frequently, neither of those things can happen. So one example is a group of retail establishments up on Deer Isle, Maine, in Stonington. A large grocery store, a medium-sized grocery store, a hardware and variety and pharmacy. So 3 different businesses, all owned by one guy, one of the largest employers in the community. These 3 businesses, he did just that. He waited until he was ready to retire, thinking that he could just sell the businesses, put them on the market. After a year and a half of trying to do that, realized that just was not going to happen. Someone from the outside in such a remote rural community is not going to come in and buy businesses like that, almost assuredly. So this was a very complicated transaction. Multiple incorporated businesses all needed to get rolled into one and then sold. At the end of the day, it worked. It took a lot of firsts, and it was a bit stressful, but they are now a worker-owned company, about 65 to 70 employees. They're still one of the largest employers in the community, and it has been very valuable to that community. The next closest place to get groceries is Blue Hill, 40 minutes away. So definitely the preservation of a community asset, the preservation of jobs was a real factor, both for the seller, for the buyers, the employees, and the community. So tremendous community support in that regard. But the immediate exit of that owner who really just wanted to go play golf in Florida was created all sorts of challenges that I'm sure people in this room can imagine. The second is a phased exit. This is wonderful. This is what you want, right? And I will let Susanne Ward talk more about her plan of a phased exit from a business, but this is the idea where you actually plan 3 to 5 years in advance. You can organize the transaction, you can start operating on a cooperative basis so that there's a real sense of ownership being developed amongst the employees. There's a slow transition of knowledge and management skills, and then it's an easy exit at that point. The third that I would point out is growth, and this doesn't have as much to do with succession planning, but it is certainly one of the options, one of the reasons why people have chosen to go this route, to convert their business into a worker cooperative. I worked with a landscaping company founded by a woman. She'd been running it for 20 years. She was growing so fast, and yet she was still answering a phone, still answering emails, still the face to every client. Many very wealthy clients who could be demanding, and really just wanted to deal with her. So in her mind, this was all about growth. It was about vesting her employees with a sense of ownership, with real ownership, and restructuring the company so that they could move forward and grow even faster, or at least keep up with the growth that they've had. They're at the end of their first year after conversion, they've exceeded all expectations. They've gone from 15 to 20% growth per year to 25 to 30% growth per year, just under a new structure that just really allowed people the opportunity and the structure to step up. So who is a good candidate? I think the answer to this question is by and large the same as it would be for make any other business attractive to an outside buyer. The business needs to be stable. It needs to have a consistent track record, has to have a stable, well-trained workforce, a solid market, a good business plan. If it doesn't have these things, it's not a good candidate for anything, I would argue. And the owner either needs to deal with the failing business he has or she has, or find something else, but nobody else is going to want it, and I would not encourage any employees to get together to take it over either. So you cannot use conversion as a life raft strategy to get off the Titanic. If the second is cash flow, if it's just barely paying the owner a salary and nothing more, well, then there isn't enough cash flow there. There isn't enough profitability in that business to actually take on debt service, to buy the business out, and still reward, to some extent, the new owners. So you've got to have sufficient cash flow to do that. Leadership, you need to have a strong, stable management structure aside from the owner, or a plan and capacity in the identified people to create that in the absence of that owner. So this is where that phased exit is so critical. You can identify those people, you can spend 2, 3, 5 years training them up internally or externally through community college system, through workforce development programs, management training programs to do that. And you also have to have some sense that you have a workforce that is skilled and committed to that business and willing to step up. And I'll talk about why that's so critical in just a second. And the last, which somehow didn't make it on my slide, is this idea of legacy. So what are the goals of that business owner? Is it to make as much money as quickly as possible for whatever personal reasons, or is it to preserve what they've built over many years, to ensure continuity of that business, some sort of commitment to their workers and their community, to make sure that that business stays viable, and to reward their employees? If that is the values that have been identified before as so critical, then this could be a very good option for you to do that. So some advantages of this route, perhaps the key one is just flexibility. A cooperative is not so much prescribed in statute or tax law. There are a number of characteristics that if you meet those characteristics, then the IRS and the state government, federal government will consider you a cooperative. So that allows for a great deal of flexibility in meeting the goals of a retiring owner, or the goals of the future employees, financial goals, management and leadership goals. So there's a great deal of flexibility in how a cooperative is set up and is managed and governed going forward. And with that, it is quite affordable relatively, certainly compared to an ESOP. So getting back to my point about how many of Maine's businesses are truly really small businesses, ESOP is just not an option for so many of Maine's businesses, but converting to a worker cooperative could be, because the costs are so much lower. Generally, and this is super generally, you're going to spend from start to finish somewhere between $15,000 and $30,000 to convert to a worker cooperative. It could be less. I've done it for $5,000 for one company that was just very simple, streamlined. Nothing else was changing beyond that. You've got lower transaction costs. You have a built-in buyer. So that both lowers transaction costs because you're not hiring brokers. You're not, there's not that distant transactional nature that you're trying to develop. You're also, just lost my place. So yeah, so there's lower transaction costs. If it's a C Corp, you can take, as in an ESOP, you can take advantage of the 1042 rollover, which is a deferral of capital gains tax on the sale. The Island Employee Cooperative up in Stonington was a deal where we were able to do that. It was a substantial additional benefit to the seller. So that is available to conversion to a worker cooperative. And the third advantage, which can also be a disadvantage, is the idea of direct ownership. And this is where the leadership is so important. I love the story of New Belgium Brewing when they converted to an ESOP. The owner, everybody got an envelope, they pulled it out. The new owner, it's a mirror. That's great. You could never do that in a worker cooperative because it is direct ownership. You're not just creating a retirement benefit or a plan within a company that you can still control. You are giving up control of that company. So that has both advantages and disadvantages. Can scare people, it can make people feel liberated. So there is that. Disadvantages, clearly unfamiliarity is probably the biggest disadvantage. People have myths and preconceptions about what cooperatives are and how they work. Some people think they're nonprofits, they're not. Some have sort of images of, some hippie collective. Everybody is sitting around debating, the most minute of management details. They can be that if you want. I'm not going to work with you if that's what you want. So unfamiliarity is probably the biggest, and then and that's where, as Steve brought up, having professional guidance can help answer those questions and help guide you through that process is so important. Leadership needs. This is sort of where that direct ownership can be both an advantage and a disadvantage. If you do not have the capacity to build a strong ownership culture, it's not going to work. Because it is direct ownership, because those workers need to form a board of directors from amongst themselves, because they are responsible for so much more in a direct way, both for management and governance, there needs to be capacity to take that on. And if there is not capacity to take that on, this is not the route to go. And finally, because of all these things, these things I've mentioned about disadvantages, I think there's probably a perceived higher sense of risk. You truly, literally are giving up control. So as Susanne will talk about, she will become one owner amongst however many. So that's, you can imagine that could be a little touchy at times. So next slide, please. So just to give a quick overview of basic process, how does this work? I'll give you both sort of a conceptual process and then a practical process, a practical framework. From a conceptual point of view, you're talking about three distinct conversions here. You're talking about an ownership transition, a management transition, and a knowledge transition. That ownership transition, that's straightforward. Who owns the company? Who owns the shares? What is the corporate structure or ownership structure? and that's a transaction. The management transition, what is it? Is the owner going to stay on for a certain number of years as a general manager and guide it through a transition period? Is there a clearly defined succession plan for management? What is that management transition? That needs to be as equally clear and defined and thought out as the ownership transition. And so all this work that goes into the ownership transaction, just as much effort and thought needs to go into that management transition. Lastly, the knowledge transition. When somebody starts and runs a business, a closely held business for decades, there is so much knowledge up in that person's head that has never been documented, decisions that get made off the cuff, and yet there's a great deal of experience backing up those decisions. What is the process for documenting that historical knowledge and then conveying it to the new owners? That is critically important as well. So that's sort of this conceptual framework, but practically speaking, are these 5 steps. So the first step, deciding to move forward. That almost inevitably is a first conversation, either at somebody's initiation with the business owner. That business owner has a lot of questions. This may sound appealing, but they've got all of these myths and stereotypes and unfamiliarity built up, and they want to get comfortable with that. And from our perspective, I want 5 years of profit and loss statements and 5 years of tax returns, and I want a balance sheet. I want to know, for my purposes, that this is a viable company before I am willing to go any further in a conversation with that business owner, and then facilitate a conversation between that business owner and their employees about how this would work, what is a worker cooperative, etc. So there's a lot built up in this deciding to move forward. It's kind of a pre-feasibility phase. The second, getting ready, that if there is in fact an interest in moving forward, both on the part of the business owner and the employees, or some number of the employees, then there is a methodical process of some training, a worker co-op 101, 201 kind of curriculum training period. I help those employees form a steering committee. So amongst the employees who are interested, are there 4, 5, 6 of them who are willing to actually commit to, if not weekly, then bi-weekly, meeting, doing that education process, understanding the financials, digging into the existing business plan and what that business plan could be going forward, writing corporate bylaws. The small committee does all that work and then brings it back to the larger pool of workers. So that's that period, the business valuation, business planning, and training. 3, defining structures. That's where I going back to what I said at the outset. There's tremendous flexibility in how a worker cooperative can be structured within the bounds of some amount of law, but within that you have a lot of flexibility. So what are those structures? Is the owner going to stay in place? Is the owner going to stay the general manager? Is the owner going to be on the board in the future cooperative, perhaps as a covenant of helping finance the deal? So a number of things like that about defining structures. For the finalizing of the transition, the transaction, so that is sitting down at a table and finishing a transaction, a purchase and sale agreement, and financing, and everybody sits down at the table and does that. And you move from a sole proprietorship, S Corp, C Corp, whatever it is, to a worker cooperative corporation under Maine statute. And then 5th, and this is as critical and perhaps more critical, certainly the most critical to the future success, is the follow through and monitoring. So the way I work with folks, getting them to the point of transaction is not even half the story. I continue to work with them and bring in other advisors and organize trainings for those workers well into the future for several years to make sure they don't mess it up. These are folks who perhaps never dreamed that they were going to own a business, never gave it any thought. They just punched the clock. They were great employees, perhaps, but all of a sudden now they have this direct ownership stake in this firm. You need to provide guidance, mentorship, training to make sure that carries on. And to also, that is oftentimes the time when you're working on that knowledge transition. I think that's Yeah, that's the end of mine. There's a few materials out in the hallway. I have a few of these that I can give out to folks. Becoming employee owned, it's a nice overview of ESOPs and management buyouts and cooperatives to sort of simply compare and contrast in one document. So with that, I think.
Great, thanks, Rob. Rob has also spoken on co-ops on the national level, and there's some other information out there. With that, we'll transition to understanding ESOPs, our last piece. Then we'll take a brief break and come back for the panel discussion. So introduce you to Jeannine, next slide, who joined Spinnaker Trust
A year ago.
In large part to really ramp up what they were doing on the trust advisory part for ESOP. So
Yep.
Thank you, Jeannine.
So I know that there have been a lot of companies that have sold to ESOPs in Maine in the past couple of years. So I know that there's a lot of buzz about ESOPs, but there's still a lot of confusion about what is an ESOP. So ESOPs, as discussed a little earlier, are fairly complex. However, the major benefit, I think, to them is that there is a lot of flexibility. There's not a one-size-fits-all. You don't need to sell 100% of the company to the ESOP. You can sell a part of the company to the ESOP. And then the other thing that is very important, I think, to a lot of business owners is that although the board of directors will, in some cases, become more structured and add more members, the board of directors and the management largely remains the same. So the company, the selling shareholder, the business owner can sell to an ESOP, and the very next day, nothing really changes with the management and the leadership of the company, which is very attractive, I think, to a lot of family-owned businesses and business owners. So an ESOP stands for Employee Stock Ownership Plan. It is a retirement plan. What happens is the business owner sells the shares to a trust that is a tax-deferred retirement plan. The beneficiaries of the plan are the employees, and therefore that's what creates the employee ownership. The complexity comes a lot with the fact that it is a retirement plan. So, we need to go by the guidelines of the IRS and the Department of Labor and follow ERISA laws. The one interesting part about an ESOP as a retirement plan is that it can borrow money. So what happens is the plan will borrow money to buy the shares, buy the company from the business owner. So why use an ESOP? A lot of times liquidity is an issue. The selling shareholder has created this wonderful business, successful business. However, a lot of their assets, all of their wealth is tied up in the business. So it's a way to get some liquidity. And again, sometimes a partial ESOP is what works for companies because it allows some liquidity from, again, as Rob said, almost a built-in buyer. It provides, a market for the company, and it's a friendly transaction. You're not selling to a strategic buyer that may take the company, the jobs out of your community, out of Maine. It's a way to ensure the legacy of the business. It also, takes the pressure off the next generation and may take the pressure off the business owner. As Steve had said, sometimes you have to face the two questions about the desire and the ability. Sometimes the desire isn't there from the next generation. However, they want to continue working at the company if they work at the company, but they don't have the desire to have the pressure of becoming the next owner. And then there's the question of ability. Maybe that person does have the desire, but they don't necessarily have the ability. So, you can allow them to be an owner and earn retirement benefits and the way that all of the other employees do. The other thing is, like a family-owned business, ESOPs have wonderful cultures. You need to be devoted to nurturing the employee ownership culture. A lot of times, ESOP companies have a lot lower, I guess, employee-owned companies have lower turnover than a lot of other companies, just based on the fact that employees are willing to invest or vest more loyalty to an employer that is directly investing in them, giving them some of the ownership of the company, which again then also increases productivity and profitability of the company. There are, lots of studies out there that say employee-owned companies grow at higher rates than non-employee-owned companies, and a lot of it is, just based on the trust and the culture that is involved in these employee-owned companies. So the good thing about the ESOP, like I said, is that a lot of the governance can remain the same. The board of directors is still in charge of the strategic plan, and it can still, most times the business owner is still, on the board of directors. And, the slow phased transition, again, is the most beneficial plan in an ESOP. If the management team is not there to take over after the selling shareholder sells the shares, a lot of times the company will not succeed. As Steve said before, ownership and management can be two different things. Employees can own the company, management can still be the selling business owner. Who is a good candidate? Again, as Rob had said, a lot of, companies, to be good candidates to sell to anyone, have the same stable history of earning profits, low debt, and borrowing capacity. The way that the ESOP is funded is by borrowing money, and you are selling to your employees. It comes at no cost to the employees, which makes the employees really want to stay and want to work hard for this company. They are earning retirement benefits at no cost to themselves. Sufficient payroll, as Rob had said, a lot of the smaller businesses are fit to be co-ops. For ESOPs, again, it's a retirement plan, and there are a lot of tax benefits. So because of that, you need to ensure that there are enough employees and enough payroll to spread the wealth of the company, the ownership of the company over. Again, strong successor management team. You need, as a selling shareholder, it's not a, take your money and run, where you're selling to a strategic buyer that's going to bring in a management team. It really, is your responsibility to your employees. You are giving the company, selling the company to your employees. You need to help, nurture that management team. And again, as Rob had said, you need to have a commitment to continuing after the transaction in educating and guiding the employees. ESOPs are very complex. It's a lot. They evolve over time. The issues that you deal with in the beginning are not the issues that you're going to deal with the plan, 10 years down the road. So, there are organizations that the company can join that have conferences where there's a lot of education, and the companies that seem to succeed the most are the companies that have committed to train their employees and their management team on ESOPs. Advantages of the ESOP, again, management can continue to run the company, increase in employee productivity and satisfaction. Again, the growth of ESOP companies are oftentimes, faster than non-employee owned companies. Turnover is often lower. Employees of ESOP companies often retire with 2 to 3 times the retirement benefit than non-ESOP companies. A lot of times the owners, they feel that, that you helped me create this company and this success. So this is, I'm going to, give back to you and invest in you by giving you an added retirement benefit that you wouldn't have otherwise. As Rob had discussed, there is the opportunity, if you're a C corporation, to defer capital gains tax on the sale proceeds. And if you are an S corporation after the transaction, the part of the company that is owned by the ESOP does not owe federal taxes, and in a lot of cases are exempt from state taxes. So 100% employee, 100% company owned by an ESOP does not owe taxes. So, one of the downsides that you often hear about ESOPs is that they are expensive to set up and expensive to maintain. But a lot of times companies see that the cash flow, that the tax savings that they get actually fund or more than fund the setup costs and the maintenance. Contributions to the ESOP are deductible up to 25% of pay. Principal payment, because what happens is you contribute to the ESOP and then the ESOP uses that money to repay a loan. That means that principal payments are, deductible to the company, which usually only interest is deductible. And again, you can borrow money to purchase the shares from the selling shareholder, from the business owner. So, if you were to sell to a member of management, a lot of times, the issue there is that the person wanting to purchase doesn't have the ability to get the cash to be able to purchase. Some of the disadvantages of an ESOP, again, leverage. A lot of companies that are ESOP companies are very successful companies. They're not used to having debt. They're not used to having bank covenants. And so a lot of times that's a transition for management. How do you now have to run a company that is more beholden to a bank than you used to be? Secondly, we talked about before, you need to get an independent third-party valuation. Because your employees now own shares of your company, that valuation needs to occur every year because we need to know how much the value is in each person's account. How much are those shares worth? So not only do you need to get the valuation, but the value of the company, once you put the debt on the books, will decrease. You have a $10 million company and you need to borrow $3 million. Obviously, the value of that $10 million company is not $10 million anymore until that debt is paid off. Repurchase obligation. This is something that is a big topic of discussion in the ESOP community. With an ESOP, you are constantly having to buy out shareholders. Phase 1 is purchasing the stock from the business owner. The company borrows money and you purchase the stock from the business owner, and that loan is paid off. Well, now all of the employees that have retirement balances inside the ESOP are your shareholders, and when they retire or terminate from the company, they need to receive the cash for their shares that they own. So it's the obligation of the company to either make contributions into the plan so that the plan has cash to liquidate people's employee participant account balances when it's time for them to leave, or if the money's not in the ESOP plan, that it's in the company, that the company, it has that ability to liquidate the balances of the employee accounts when it's time for them. So it's, you know, a constant repurchasing shares from participants. There is a fiduciary liability. Now you are, you know, liable to all of these owners that have account balances. It's not just you as the business owner and you can make decisions for yourself. The administration and record keeping is fairly complex. As you know, discussed in the past, your advisory team is very important. Making sure that you have an advisory team that really understands ESOPs. There are a lot of companies that can do 401k administration. Not all of them understand about ESOP administration. And so, you know, as with everything, you know, finding the right advisors helps you avoid problems so that you're not having to clean up a mess down the road. And then startup costs. Again, you know, I know that startup costs is a big topic of conversation with ESOPs. I think that you can, you know, spend a lot of money. I know that there have been, you know, people talking about how they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to establish their ESOPs, but it doesn't need to be that way. You're not going to be able to set one up for $15,000 like you can, you know, a co-op. But, you know, again, a lot of what needs to happen is the thought process beforehand. The more you can think about your succession planning and what is important to you beforehand can really help in the costs, because, you know, a lot of times, you know, we find that it takes multiple meetings to be able to answer some of those basic questions that Steve talked about. What is important to you? What, you know, is it money? Is it, you know, maintaining the legacy of the business? What are your goals here? And then elements that lead to a successful ESOP. You know, Danielle will talk a lot about the strong ownership and family feel. The culture really, you know, is a huge driver in the success of ESOP companies. The buy-in of management. Again, you know, management needs to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. They need to really believe in and, you know, educate that next level of management. They do need to be open enough to turn over some of, you know, the responsibility, so that when they walk out the door, the company doesn't fall apart, which, you know, is basic. You don't need that just in an ESOP company. You need that in all companies to be able to succeed. And then the big thing with ESOPs are valuations. Again, we talked about the valuation is very important to an ESOP. So having realistic projections in your valuation that the company is able to meet is a very important aspect, so that we can be sure that the value of the company is going to grow the way that it should, and help encourage employees and the company to all believe in the success of the company.
And then, thank you. One slide on the team, which is...
Yeah, so the ESOP team, you know, like I said, there are a lot of advisors involved. Usually there are again, you have to remember that this is a transaction, this is a sale of a business. It's hard to sometimes remember that because you're selling to your employees, but usually there's a team on the company side and a team on the trustee side. Because this is a retirement plan, you need to have a trustee, which is where I come into play. I am the buyer. I represent the employees, the trust that is buying the company. So, you know, there are financial advisors on both sides. There's attorneys on both sides. And a lot of times, you know, there's a bank involved. One of the good things about an ESOP is that you don't need to be fully funded. The transaction doesn't need to be fully funded or funded at all by the bank. If the business owner chooses to take note over time and say, I'm willing to receive the value of my company, you know, over the next 8 to 10 years, you don't even need to involve a bank if that's a decision that the business owner makes.
Thank you. We're going to take about a 5-minute break and then launch into our panel discussion, but can we get a big round of applause for Thank you. Good job,
Everything is said.
So when we come back, what I thought we'd do is, you know, sure, we go down and talk a little bit about how they play together. But what we wanted to do was have some stories from some folks that have been through some of these transitions or are in the midst of some of these transitions. Because that's what you folks are dealing with as a business owner. So we want to make sure that we get the practical side of some of this as well. And so to do that, we're going to lead off with Jim, who's going to talk with us a little bit about their process at Sun Media, then transition to Susanne to talk about how she came to decide to set up a co-op with Rock City Roasters. And then we will finish off that first piece with Danielle, who's at Moody's, which is both family-owned and a partial ESOP. So Jim, here you go.
Thank you very much, and good morning. We actually operate Sun Media Group as a very different, in a different way. And so I work with 2 brothers and a sister, all who were 4th generation and have equal ownership. And we operate as a general management team. So all 4 of us have equal say in the running of the company. And in that vein, we drew straws for who was going to do this today, because we truly believe that any one of us could have done it without embarrassing the family. But I got the short straw, so here I am. Sun Media Company is a daily newspaper company and a weekly newspaper company. We own the Lewiston Daily Sun and 15 weekly publications around the state. We also have a commercial print operation. We print the Bangor Daily News. And we have diversified into some other areas also over the years. We have some magazines that we publish, and we have a real estate holding company. The family business dates back to 1898, when my great-grandfather was brought into the business by his uncle. My grandfather then succeeded his father and came into the business in the 1930s, and my dad succeeded his father and came into the business in the 1950s, and that structure was fairly easy to work through. So we're currently in the 4th generation. The 5th generation is in the process of going through college and graduating. We have 200 employees. And are very committed to the employees and the communities that we serve. There are 5 siblings in the 4th generation. We are all equal owners. We all own the exact same amount of stock. 4 of those siblings work in the business together. I have an older sister who does not work in the business, but her husband does. Of the 4 of us, we all have day-to-day operational responsibilities. My sister Maureen is HR and business office. My brother David, who's here today, is forecasters and technology. My brother Stephen is marketing, and I am production and operations. And then we share, as I said, general management responsibilities, because one of the things that we believe, and we've worked at for a long time, is that we make better decisions collectively than we would individually. And it kind of makes for a very unique thought process when you're working through those decision-making processes. And it has worked well for us. So our company is a C Corp. There are 3 different classes of stock: voting, non-voting, and preferred. 51% of the stock was held by my father until he recently passed in 2015. We have buyback agreements, so the company bought back the stock when that happened. And we now, 5 siblings now own 100% of the company. So according to our bylaws, stock has to be bought back as when it's first offered up. It has to be offered back to the company first. Over the years, that helped us recapitalize and for purpose of shrinking some of the and moving some of the worth of the company out of my father's estate. And we, and I don't recommend this, but we were spurred to taking a look at succession planning when my father had a heart attack. And we came to the realization that we didn't really have a great plan to move forward if something did happen. So we had been going to an organization called Family Newspaper Organization and heard a lot of stories and got to meet with a lot of people about what they had done. We've been very involved with this organization for quite a while and certainly have used a lot of consultants to help us along the way. But back in 1988, my dad made a couple of very key decisions for us, which has helped us get to where we are today. First, he created a holding company that would allow for succession and transfer of stock and things from his estate into the 4th generation. And we all became equal holders of that company. Secondly, we, and this one has a little teeth to it, adopted bylaws and shareholder agreement within the holding company that states each person has equal shares, but the shares can be called at any time for $8 a share. And so the reason that we put this in place is because we've all heard the horror stories of what can happen when family businesses are torn apart by squabbling and things that happen, or disagreements. And so we felt that this was a strong way to avoid that kind of thing. If I go off the rails, my brothers and sisters can buy me out for $1 a share. It's around 900 shares, so you're not going to retire on that kind of money. So the structure has worked for us. The 4 of us have grown up in the business. We've pretty much worked together for the last 27 years. During that period of time, we've worked heavily on communicating. We've worked over the years with estate financial planners, family business consultants, psychologists. One of the things that we really needed to learn was how to get past our sibling rivalry, and to everybody, understands and interprets a little bit differently. So we need to learn how to talk to each other, as business partners versus siblings. And so there was a lot of people that helped us with exercise along the way. We did the Myers-Briggs study so that we could understand everybody's personality and how they worked, and how we needed to present information to them so that they could interpret it properly. And that has really helped us perform, I think, at the level that we're performing today, and get us to the point where we are today. We've expanded the business along the way. We had, about 15 years ago, put in a outside board of directors that has really helped us. They have given us a lot of insight. They brought us to the next level in terms of our professionalism in our work in the business. They've given us a lot of insight and feedback on things that we could do and do better, and pushed us all the way along the way. So Right now, we're in the process of taking a look at how do we transition to our next phase, and we have just started that process, so.
Jim, one question, if you could address quickly for us. Is it a given that family members get to come into the business? Or what does that process look like for you folks?
For the 5th generation, we have specific guidelines for them coming into the business. They first need to work outside of the business for 2 to 3 years. And then there has to be a position for them that is open for them to come back into the business, and they need to be qualified for that position.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do now is transition to Susanne to talk with us a little bit about how you started the company and why you chose co-op and what that transition means to you personally, means for the company.
Okay, thanks very much for having me here. Good morning. My husband and I moved to Maine 25 years ago and rapidly realized we'd have to buy ourselves a job. We're in Rockland. It's a town of a little less than 8,000 people, and so there are not a lot of opportunities up there. And we decided, loving books and coffee, that we would open a small bookshop and coffee house. And little did we know that we were the first bookshop coffee house in Maine, and also the first espresso bar in Maine. And the town was, everybody in the town was just scratching their heads thinking, what are these idiots doing? But there's also a huge creative community in that area, and they quickly found us, and within 3 years we had to move to a new space that was quadruple the size. And we kind of expanded the cafe part of our business and became a very well-known cafe, lunch place, coffee place, and had been wanting to eventually roast our own coffee. So in 1999, we opened a coffee roastery, a micro roastery, and it was really a great thing. We were trying to find a building we could put the entire operation in, but we weren't able to do that. So we bought a building that we put the coffee roastery in, and at that point, my husband and I did not work in the same office, which was fabulous. We were really complementary, but it was sometimes hard to work together and go home together at night. So it was tough. It was a real struggle. We were way ahead of the curve in Rockland, probably in Maine too. It was hard. We operated in the red for many, many years, and so it was tough. And finally, at the nadir of 2008-2009 mess, things were really pretty rough, and I wondered if the business would survive. And somehow we pulled out, and for the last 4 or 5 years now, we've been doing really well and finally operating at a very good profit. And my husband died 6.5 years ago, and I ended up having to take on the whole business. So I divested of the bookstore part of it, seeing the writing on the iPads and Amazon.com, and sold it to one of my employees. And so I just had the cafe and the coffee roastery to deal with, and I was able to put a lot more attention to those 2 aspects of it. But at this point in my life, I started thinking, what am I going to do? I cannot continue to do this until I die. And so I started thinking about how I was going to get out of it. And at first I toyed with the idea of selling the business, but my business has been an amazing asset in Rockland, and people really have supported it. And I have fantastic employees who have helped to build that business. And I just kept thinking to myself, there's got to be some way besides just selling it to somebody, which I probably could do very easily, who would come in and go, I love this business, now I'm going to change it completely, and then have the business go under, because that happens so often when people sell businesses. So I wanted to ensure the succession of the business. That's a really important thing for me. So many people have said to me, Rock City is the reason I moved to Rockland. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Oh, I love your place. And as Rob has said, if you say you're going to meet somebody for coffee in Rockland, you have to designate whether if it's not going to be at Rock City, because that's just where people go. So it's an important part of the town and something I'm very proud of. And the other thing is that, for a small business, it's a cafe and a coffee roastery. It's kind of astonishing how the longevity of my employees. We just celebrated the 41st birthday of one of my longest employees yesterday. And he started working for me when he was 20. And it's just kind of astonishing that I have that kind of loyalty and longevity. So I wanted to, as a part of my exit, I wanted to reward those employees, most of whom would never have dreamed of being owners of business. And thirdly, of course, I'm looking for an income for myself out of it, so I have to sell it on some level or another in order to create that for myself. So I had done a little bit of reading about co-ops and was thinking, well, maybe I should explore this a little bit. And then somebody, a mutual acquaintance, introduced me to Rob, and he came and talked to me about it. We started talking, 2 years ago, Rob?
2.5.
I say, start 5 years before you're even thinking about retiring. That's what I say. I didn't realize it would be as long a process. And we had a number of conversations, and I still was not really sure whether this is the way I wanted to go. I was thinking, I'm an S Corp, and I was thinking, well, what if I just issued stock to those employees that I, want to take over the business, and I just stay the major stockholder? Then I thought to myself, it's really time to pass it on to the next generation. I think that it's, the most of the people who have committed to this co-op are in their mid-30s to early 40s. And that's an enormously creative time in a business owner's life. And I think that they can move this business forward in a way I just don't have the energy to do anymore. And so that's part of the excitement that I have about passing this on to a younger generation. It's kind of like, I don't have another generation. I don't have children. I don't have anybody interested in this business that is a part of my family. So these are sort of my family, and this is my next generation of people that is getting passed on to. So I feel very good about this. I'm not terrified of it. I'm terrified that it won't work, but I'm also very, very excited, and they are as well. And I think one of the major reasons I'm confident, even though I'm terrified, is because I'm already seeing that change in my employees. I'm already seeing that sense of ownership and pride. And in fact, we were having an interview this morning up in Rockland from Channel 5 about the co-op, and they looked at me because everybody has said, we want to talk to Susanne about this transition from her business to a co-op. And they looked at me like, oh, you're not going to be here? What do we do? And I said, you are the new co-op. Come on, lads. You can do the interview. It will be fabulous. It's good for people to see it from your perspective, not just my perspective, because I will just be one of the owners when we finalize this transition. So I think.
And Susanne, how many employees do you have?
I have 25 employees.
And how many folks have signed on to be part of the co-op? 14. 14.
Yeah.
So interestingly, with a co-op, as opposed to an ESOP, right? ESOP generally, there are some exceptions, right? But with an ESOP, generally all your employees are in the trust.
Right.
But with a co-op, you have people who are electing whether or not they want to participate going forward.
Right, and there's a membership buy-in, so they do have to pay a certain amount to become members of the co-op, but it's not a large amount. We like to think it's about the price of a used car that they might buy. So it's affordable for them to buy in, and it can be financed as a payroll withholding for them. So it makes it something they can do. It's accomplishable for them, and I think that's a great thing, because another thing that happens in this situation is that it's not just, in our area, which is fairly rural and people don't have many opportunities to build any kind of wealth or equity in anything, they now will be building equity, each of them, in a business that I have solely owned. And so it gives them, because it works very much as an ESOP does in terms of a retirement investment for them. They're investing in that business, and because they're investing in that business and their future income or their retirement is tied up directly with the success of the business, they're going to be more likely to be looking at that business as their future and working towards their future with it.
Great, thank you. That brings us to Danielle Moody. So can you tell us a little bit about Moody's, your role there, and how the ESOP plays in?
Yep, I'm Danielle Moody. I work with Moody's Collision, and I'm the daughter of owner and founder Sean Moody, who's sitting here and staring at me. I've been with the business for 6 years, and it's kind of like what Jim said about having to go and interview with the company. I had to go in and actually interviewed with my uncle. He offered me minimum wage after 4 years of college, and I was really upset. And I went home and told my dad about it, and he's like, well, we're not just going to give you a job. Go in and negotiate and get yourself what you think your salary should be and everything. So Moody's is family owned, but it's not run like a family business in that sense. Everybody has to work for what they have. I work with our resource management department, and we basically do the payables, receivables, payroll, benefit administration. Moody's Collision started back in 1977. My dad was a senior in high school when he started the business. And from there, today we've grown to 9 locations. So we have from down in Sanford all the way up to Augusta, and 155 coworkers. The Moody's became an ESOP in 2003, and I wasn't with the company at that time, but in talking to my dad, we started off really small and slow, and the first year he actually gifted the stock to the coworkers, to the ESOP Trust, and that was 1.5% of the company. So like Jeannine had mentioned, a lot of these recent transactions, you've seen 100% ownership. And that's scary to think about. It doesn't have to be that way. There's no right or wrong way. It's how you feel, where you're at within the organization as the owner, but also where your organization is at. So we started at 1.5%. Today, the coworkers own 34% of the company. So we're still a minority ownership, and my dad owns the other 66% of the company. And looking back, the way that he structured it was very methodical and well thought out. He took that opportunity with the ESOP to lay a groundwork and a foundation of trust and that culture. Becoming an ESOP does not mean that your company is suddenly going to have great culture and everyone's going to love coming to work. It's actually quite the opposite. I mean, if you don't understand how something works, a lot of times you fear that because you think that somebody's trying to take advantage of you. So when Sean spoke to everybody and said, I'm going to sell the company to you guys, everyone's like, whoa, we can't afford that. What's going to happen to us? What's going to happen to the company? So by starting slow and gifting that stock, he said, we're all in this together, and I'm going to help guide this ship, and this is the direction that I think that Moody's is going to head. And I built a really strong foundation, and from there, our culture has really taken off, and you get that sense of employee ownership. At Moody's, we don't have employees, we have coworkers, and we have co-owners. Everybody that works at Moody's has a key to the building. There's 155 people in the state of Maine that have a key to our Moody's facilities. These are multi-million-dollar facilities, hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment, and we have 18-year-olds that can come in on the weekend, come right into the facility, and change their oil. But becoming an ESOP holds them accountable and gives them that responsibility that they would never take advantage. You might show up and see that 18-year-old working on their vehicle. Not all the lights in the shop are on, just that one bay that they're working in, because they're a co-owner and the bottom line matters to them. You've held them accountable. One thing that Susanne touched upon was you give co-workers an opportunity to share in the success of the company and in that equity growth. Nowadays, a collision repair facility is very expensive startup costs. You have to have the equipment, you have to have the training to get into that business. This gives our coworkers an opportunity to work at Moody's, but also own the business as well. It kind of lights a fire in that entrepreneurial spirit where people might have awesome ideas about how to grow Moody's, but now we're a team and they can bring those ideas to the table and we can use them and we can institute them in our day-to-day operations. Because successful business, if you depend on only one person, you're only going to get so far. It's really important that you make that you have a team that's built around you that can help push you to the next level. One of the things about Moody's that I really respect and I really enjoy working there is our transparency and our open book management. I think that we had that before we became an ESOP, but the buy-in to it has really increased over the years because now everybody can look at our key performance indicators and they understand how it works and they care and they want to be able to add value. So they're always asking, okay, my efficiencies are this, how can I get it to the next level? Because I can physically see we meet on a quarterly basis, we do profit sharing, I can see how I had a tough month last month and it hurt the growth and the profitability of the company. How can I get to the next level and help the company? So I think that's really important at Moody, something that we do. And a lot of these things that we do, we instituted, like I said before, we started the ESOP. So by becoming an ESOP, it's not like it happens overnight that all of these pieces fall into play. It has to be methodically, it has to be well thought out, and you have to get the buy-in from the coworkers. Because just by becoming an ESOP, that's not what is going to do it. One thing that I'm not sure if everyone knows, there's 11,000 ESOPs within the state of Maine, within the nation, which is 13 million co-owners in the nation. So ESOPs do play a significant role within the nation. Right here in Maine, we have about 30 ESOPs, and that number's growing. One is Allen Insurance Agency. They've been in business for 150 years, and they've been an ESOP for 27 years. So the ESOP community is well established, and there are a lot of very successful companies out there that are doing it and doing it well, and not all of them are 100%. So.
One thing I wanted to ask you, Danielle, was you talked about having to go on an interview with your uncle, but at that point, the ESOP was already established and some of that transition to the co-worker culture had taken place. So did that provide a nice safety valve for you as a second generation as far as the choices you saw about whether to go into Moody's or whether to pursue outside interests?
I don't think so. My dad's never put pressure on me or any of my brothers to work at Moody's or take over the business. I think that's just the way we were raised. It was never expected of us to come back and work in the family business. There's 4 of us in our family, and 2 of them don't currently work within the business. I think, if anything, the ESOP, it inspired me to come back in the sense that becoming an ESOP, it allows, I think, coworkers feel more comfortable with change and they're more comfortable with adaptability and knowing that Moody's, maybe we changed our name to Moody's Coworker Owned. We might not always be a collision repair facility. We might invest in other avenues. That just the culture within the organization is one of looking forward, looking not tomorrow, what's the plan? It's 10 years down the road, what's the plan? Because this is tied to my retirement and I want Moody's to be successful. So I just love that everyone at Moody's is always embracing change and trying to get to the next level.
Great. So are there questions that you folks have?
How do the taxes work if you're only a partial ESOP?
So the question.
Co-ops, do they also not pay income tax or not pay any tax on principal paid on loans?
So I'm going to repeat the question for our folks that are online. So the question is, how do the taxes work in a partial ESOP? And then also, are there any tax advantages or differentiation with a co-op?
Right.
Correct? So Rob, could you answer from a co-op perspective?
So the primary tax advantage with a worker co-op is that there is no corporate income tax. So the corporation, the business pays no income tax. The profits are allocated to the shareholders, but stay within the business. So they're essentially building internal accounts. So those shareholders pay personal income tax on that allocation. And by federal law, they're required to distribute 20% of the allocation. So if there's $1,000 in profit, you're allocated $800 by law, you must be distributed a minimum of $200 because you pay income tax on that within the year in which it's allocated to you. but there is no corporate income tax. So you've got some of the legal and structural benefits of a C Corp without the corporate taxation. Does that make sense?
And then for partial ESOP, do you want
For the part of the company that is owned by the ESOP does not owe taxes. So if you're a partial ESOP, the part of the company that is owned by the ESOP does not owe the taxes, but the outside shareholders outside of the ESOP still will still owe taxes. So if it's an S Corp, it flows through personal income taxes the way that it does before there was an ESOP, and if it's a C Corp, the corporation owes the taxes.
Yeah, we're 34% coworker owned, so we don't pay 34% of our state and federal taxes.
So people can hear that, what Danielle said, was there 34% coworker owned? So 34% of the tax liability gets passed through to the trust, so that they essentially don't pay tax on that 34% of their profits. Other questions?
Can one of you talk about the fiduciary responsibilities and potential conflicts of interest and how those conflicts of interest can be managed? That's probably a whole day seminar.
So to repeat the question, with the caveat that it probably is its own whole day seminar, the question is, what are the inherent conflicts of interest from a fiduciary perspective that are associated with an ESOP, or both ESOP and co-op, with an ESOP specifically? So
again, there is a fiduciary responsibility. So therefore, because the ESOP is a trust, there is a trustee. There is not a requirement that trustee be an independent third party. However, with conflicts of interest, it is highly suggested that there is an independent third party because, again, it is selling of the company. And so if the business owner is the business owner, the board of directors, the CEO of the company, and the trustee of the ESOP, there are a lot of conflicts of interest and you need to think about what position you are in when you are making a decision. And because you are beholden to the employees now and the standards of the Department of Labor and the IRS, sometimes it's easier to separate those responsibilities. And an independent third party is one of them, and we also highly encourage independent members be added to the board of directors. Again, that's a very scary thing for a lot of business owners. Usually after it happens, as Jim said, they wonder why they didn't do it earlier. The perspective that they get from these other independent members is oftentimes a lot more helpful than the fear of this person's going to come in and tell me that I'm running the business wrong.
Other questions?
If you had either established a co-op or an ESOP, I guess, how would it work if you were to acquire another company? How would that be bolted on to the new organization?
So how does a co-op or an ESOP do acquisitions?
Yeah.
For an ESOP, the company and the strategic plan of the company really is still in the hands of the board of directors. So if board of directors and management decide that they want to acquire a business, they still run the company and acquire the business. If that business has employees, those employees now will become employees of the new company and now be eligible to participate in the ESOP.
So it would work as any other company who wanted to acquire another company, and making some assumptions about the whole corporate structure, those new employees of the new company that was acquired would have voluntary ability to join the cooperative, to become members, to become shareholders of the cooperative.
So, and I think it also becomes a question of what's the overall intent and structuring, because there are structures where an ESOP company could make an acquisition, and that acquisition could be a subsidiary that would be held out from the ESOP, so the new employees don't necessarily have to participate in the ESOP if there's some reason to do it that way. The other thing that's interesting is in an ESOP company, there are companies that then will use the stock of the company as an acquisition currency. So particularly if you're looking at other C Corps, extending some of those Section 1042 benefits. So again, it's flexibility. One of the beautiful things about an ESOP from my perspective is it's kind of like this plain vanilla base of ice cream that you can add all kinds of different interesting flavors to. So it doesn't have to be cookie cutter. It doesn't have to be 100% S Corp ESOP. There's a lot of flexibility inherent in what you can do with the structure.
What's your typical board formation look like of an ESOP? Is it composed of family members, employee stock owners, and then outside objective consultants? Or what's your recommended, I guess, structure for something like that in terms of numbers and also in terms of type of composition?
Yeah, you want to go?
I just want to repeat, well, I was just going to repeat the question. So the question is, on an ESOP company, from a board governance perspective, what does it look like? How many family members? How many employee members? How many outside members?
And again, I think that kind of depends on the company. A lot of times we just tend to suggest possibly having one outside board member and taking baby steps. A lot of times the company will just have the shareholder, the business owner will really be the board member. There isn't an official board. So usually, we like to have the business owner basically, decide and really think about, is there someone on management that that I should have on here? Who are some outside consultants or advisors that maybe have some ESOP experience. A lot of times that is very helpful to companies if they have someone join their board that worked for an ESOP company or have knowledge of ESOP companies, because they just can help guide, the ESOP aspect and add that into your business.
Yeah, our board of directors is essentially my dad, so we're at 34%. But it's important, I think Jeannine made a really great point, is the ESOP, it is what you make it. It doesn't need to be this, it is complex. I do the administration of the ESOP, there is a lot of pieces to it, but I can understand, I can understand the aspects that Moody's needs to know. And it's not, it's as complex as you want to make it. So you can start off small, 1.5% of the company, and then you build upon that. So.
Great. And folks, that brings us to a little bit past the end of our time. So if we get a big round of applause for our panelists.
Some door prizes, and I really would appreciate if you have a minute to do the survey. So I'll come around and drop these. Oh, and I have someone's sunglasses. Do you know whose sunglasses these are? Did anyone lose any? No? All right.
All right, thank you again.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you.
Is that the door prize?
And
Thank you. So somehow it never dawned on me until today that one of the major differences